James Wilder. And then there's a book, Living from the Heart, God Gave You, or actually it's Living from the Heart, Jesus Gave You. And a lot of us have been going through the other half of the church too. So I'll be drawing those later if I don't take care of them now. Most of the material for this I got in it's an ebook called The Lifeboat in Your Brain. And if you want to look it up to get the whole thing, the web page for it, the web page for it is on the back of the Sharing Joy handout. It's on the very bottom. So it starts out, why is joy important? We find out that our brain works best with joyful relationships. We rely on these brain skills that we learned, and usually we have them learned by age 3. But the good news is that if you didn't learn them by age 3, our brain is able, if we practice them, to pick up what we didn't get at age 3. The more joy we have, the better we're able to respond to moment situations. And I'm not going to read everything in the notes because you can read those later. The things that interest you are the things that you're going to research and look at later. So I'm in the time that we have, I'm just going to try and hit the highlights there. So when you meet someone, what is the first thing that happens that tells you someone is happy to see you? Smile, that's really good. Are there any other things that and hopefully when you came in the room today, you felt welcome. So, anything else you can think of that told them? Body expressions, especially, yay! You're here, come in for a hug. That's kind of a tip-off. The thing about the brain is that when we receive information, the right side of our brain has a really fast processor. And the right side of the brain will tell you if that person's really happy to see you or not, even before you have a cognizant awareness that they're happy to see you. Have you ever wondered sometimes when someone shakes your hand and you feel like it's a car salesman, a used car salesman, even though they're smiling and even though they're doing the appropriate things, something in you says, they're not really interested in me. It's because that right side of your brain has processed the information and you've gotten the sense of it unconsciously before it works out into actual what really happens. So that part of our brain that processes is hard to fool. And so that's why you need to pay attention to some of the things that you sense when you meet someone or come into situations, because that part of your brain has been trained to pick up the cues and to process them accordingly. Okay, so we did say the facial changes, the change in body language, positive verbal communication, and on through that. There are physical things too that happen. The thing about joy is it's contagious. Have you ever been in a room where someone told a really bad joke, but someone started laughing and you couldn't help it? You started laughing at this same silly joke that wasn't really funny. And then before you know it, the whole room is laughing. And that's because joy is contagious, and whatever struck someone as funny, it just, the joy itself kind of spreads around. Sometimes with the physical clues, eye contact can say everything. My kids used to say, you better behave, Mom has a look. Not all of my kids responded the same way to the look. Some of them took it as a challenge. But when they saw the look, they knew that their leash was short when they saw the look. So those are all ways that you can communicate joy as well as other things. I just have highlighted on the second page here, technically nonverbal expressions of joy are described as right hemisphere to right hemisphere communication, which amplifies our most desired positive emotional state. Relational joy is best conveyed face to face, but tone of voice is a close second. And I remember as a pretty new believer, I was 17 when I chose to walk with the Lord. And we were we would go to part of a youth ministry. It was sponsored by a church, but it wasn't in a church. And I remember going into the house one day, and there was a lady, and she was a couple of years older than me, and I knew her name, but I didn't really know her and didn't really think much about her, either negative or positive. But I walked in one day, and she said, "Marie!" And her face lit up, and that touched something in me, and it was like, from then on, she was my friend, and I was happy to see her because she'd been happy to see me. And at that time, new believer, I was reading through the Bible for the first time, and you can kind of judge where I was at by where I started in the Gospels, and I just happened to come to 1 John 4:19. We love because he loved us first. And I thought, that was Paula. I love her because her face lit up when I came into the room. That was sharing joy. That is sharing joy. So what happens, because we need joy for well-being, what happens if we have a low joy level, we'll seek it in other ways that aren't as legitimate, and they're really counterfeit because they don't last as long. Sin is good for a season, it's pleasant for a season, and then the bottom drops out. And that's what happens with this pseudo-joy, or the things that we use to try and make ourselves joyful that don't really have the expected end. Okay. What I wanted to do also was read the story in the book I told you about, the ebook. The man who wrote it, he said, "We were standing in line to board an airplane when the announcement was made that our plane was full because this was the last flight we knew we faced an overnight stay. One passenger in line suddenly lost it. In a rage, he threw his bags and spewed profanities. His raging voice echoed in the terminal. Passengers scattered." Have you ever had that? No one really wants to be around that. The guy was no longer in relational mode. What was your first clue? As I made my way over to the ticket desk, he walked around the terminal screaming at everyone in uniform. I could see his face, and his intense emotions were scaring people. By this time, his eyes were bulging, and he was sweating profusely. As he neared the ticket desk, I felt compelled to reach out to him. I knew this man was drowning. He needed some serious help returning to joy, so I took a deep breath and walked up to him. For a moment, I wondered if he would knock me out. "You're really having a bad day, aren't you?" I asked affirmingly. "You're blank right I am having a bad day," he fired back. We locked eyes for a few moments. Then I said, "Well, I'm a pastor, a follower of Jesus, and I would be honored if I could pray with you." I was pleasantly relieved when he muttered, "Okay, yeah, sure." Standing in the middle of the terminal, we bowed our heads. I put my hand on his shoulder. We took a moment of quiet, that is skill 2, which next time we come together we'll talk about that. Then I invited Emmanuel to share distress and to bring some vision, which is skill 13. I noticed tears running down his face. "You see," he explained, "I've been traveling for medical help because I was recently diagnosed with serious cancer. This flight cancellation takes away my precious, limited time with my wife and daughters. For a few minutes we shared sadness, and then he said, "Wait, I have to do something." He retraced his steps and apologized to every single airline employee he had offended. After several minutes, he returned. "I've been feeling like I need to get right with God," he told me. I wonder if this whole ordeal is God speaking. A sparkle of joy appeared in his eyes as his face muscles relaxed. The next morning I saw him boarding the flight with a smile and a brand new Bible under his arm.
Hallelujah.
And that is an example of sharing joy. And to practice it is very simple. Just smile at people. Just acknowledge